This is one of the few videos where I actually go into a little bit of detail with the anatomy, but the anatomy is important to understand so that we can understand the physiology. Okay, and so with this video, we're going to talk about 4 different pathways found in the autonomic nervous system. We're going to talk about the main parasympathetic pathway, we're going to talk about the typical sympathetic pathway, and then we've got 2 exceptions to that sympathetic pathway. So to start off, we're going to talk about the parasympathetic pathway. Now I want you to know that there are 4 things that you need to know for each of these pathways, okay, and for each neuron that's in the pathway. With the exception, there's one exception, but 3 of these 4 pathways have 2 neurons involved. You have a preganglionic neuron and you have a postganglionic neuron. For each of those neurons, you need to know the relative length, whether or not it's myelinated, what neurotransmitter is released, and what kind of receptor that neurotransmitter binds to. So keep that in mind. So as we go through this, each pathway you'll have no more than 8 things that you need to remember. So it might seem like a lot, but it's not too bad. And so to start off, we're going to start off with the parasympathetic pathway. Okay? So with the parasympathetic pathway, it has got a long preganglionic neuron. So I'll put pre here, and that'll be the case for all of them. And then we've got a postganglionic neuron. Okay? But let's talk about the preganglionic neuron first. Okay? The preganglionic neuron is myelinated. And so here are my little nodes of, my myelin sheaths. Okay? And so we've got a myelinated neuron. Now this neuron releases acetylcholine. So I'm hopefully that wherever I've got green, it's acetylcholine. Okay, and this is released onto the postganglionic neuron, a muscarinic. I'm actually just going to write it out here. So nicotinic. So it's nicotinic cholinergic receptor. Okay. And so then we have our postganglionic neuron. This is a relatively short neuron. Nice thing is it's not myelinated, so there's nothing for me to draw there. It also releases acetylcholine. But in this case, and we're just going to say that here is my heart here. Okay, so there's my heart, 4 chambers. Okay, it releases acetylcholine. But in this case, at the postganglionic junction, it's a muscarinic cholinergic receptor. Okay, so we've got our 4 things here. So let's come back. We have a long myelinated neuron. It releases acetylcholine onto a nicotinic cholinergic receptor. And just to remember, the nicotinic cholinergic receptor is going to be on the postganglionic neuron. The postganglionic neuron is short, it's unmyelinated. It also releases acetylcholine, but in this case, it's a muscarinic cholinergic neuron or receptor, and that receptor is actually on an organ. So in this case, it's on the heart. Okay, so let's do the same thing, but now we're going to do it for the sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so we've got sympathetic nervous system. Okay, there's actually only one difference between the typical parasympathetic pathway and the sympathetic pathway for the preganglionic neuron, and that difference is it's a short neuron. Okay, so it is myelinated, and it does release acetylcholine, so green is my acetylcholine, and it's also a nicotinic cholinergic receptor. Okay. Now, when it comes to the postganglionic neuron, there's actually only one thing that's the same. Okay, the sympathetic neuron is long, it's unmyelinated, that's the only thing that's similar between the two. And in this case, instead of releasing acetylcholine, it releases norepinephrine. So here's my norepinephrine, so NE for norepinephrine, and this is an adrenergic receptor. Okay, so again, I'm just going to draw the heart here, so it does do something to the heart. So the adrenergic receptor would be on the heart or whatever organ that we're talking about. So just quick recap, short, myelinated, releases acetylcholine onto a nicotinic cholinergic receptor. And so just to be clear, this is acetylcholine here. The postganglionic neuron is long, it's unmyelinated. It releases norepinephrine onto an adrenergic receptor that's on the heart or whatever organ. Okay? So then we've got one of our exception pathways. And so with this, it's sweating. Okay? It is the exact same pathway in the preganglionic. Okay? So we've got myelin, we've got acetylcholine onto a nicotinic cholinergic receptor. And then we've got a long, unmyelinated neuron. But in this case, it also releases acetylcholine. All right, but in this case, instead of being an adrenergic receptor, because acetylcholine does not bind to or activate an adrenergic receptor, it activates a muscarinic cholinergic receptor. Okay, we're going to try and draw a little teardrop here. Okay, that's my little, this is sweat. Okay, that's what this is supposed to be. So we activate our sweat glands. This also activates the pathway that gives us goosebumps. All right, so that's our one exception, or one of our two exceptions. Then we've got the adrenal gland. Okay, the adrenal gland is likely the easiest pathway to remember. Okay, it's got a short myelinated neuron that releases acetylcholine. It's just the same as all the other sympathetic pathways. Okay, so acetylcholine, nicotinic, cholinergic receptor. But what's different in this case is that it synapses directly with the adrenal gland. Okay, so this is my adrenal gland right here. And what happens is the adrenal gland releases epinephrine into, this is my bloodstream here. So we release epi into the bloodstream. Okay, so these are our four pathways. We've got one parasympathetic, and then we've got three sympathetic neurons, or three sympathetic pathways. Like I said, the adrenal gland is unique in that there's only a preganglionic neuron, ultimately activating that adrenal gland to release epi, and then the sweating and goosebumps is the exact same, except for at the very end where it releases acetylcholine instead of norepinephrine, and it releases acetylcholine onto a muscarinic cholinergic receptor.